All right, Z. So my first question is, how have you been? And give me the realest answer you
Yeah,
can.
for sure. I have been going through sort of like a roller coaster this entire year. I kind of shifted myself from a sort of someone who is very focused in doing a lot of mindset work, mindset techniques for my own healing.
Hmm.
And I actually had to go through a process of looking at myself from a pure body perspective, looking at myself from just pure like my body physiology and how I have been taking care of myself and how I've been, sort of showing up in this world. And that's been it's been very interesting. It's been very interesting because I'm someone who's very analytical.
Yeah,
And
same.
so, yeah. So really, it's been a roller coaster getting to know my body, getting to know my nervous system. And I'm excited to share more and talk more about
Same.
that.
Yeah, that's perfect because nervous system is something I wanted to talk about because I hear you talk about it in your social media, your TikTok, your YouTube, and I will post all those links below.
Mhm.
But yeah, so let's talk about the nervous system. Let's start there. Tell
Sure.
me about your understanding of the nervous system.
So right now, one thing that I can tell you that I've actually have had to learn how to sort of get to know my nervous system is, for instance, right now, as I'm sitting down and I'm talking to you, I can see a lot within my body and how I feel right now. And so learning about my nervous system is also about being present with how I feel internally. I can feel a little bit of like nervousness, a little bit of anxiety in my stomach. And all of that comes with training myself to be more aware of like my body language. And so right now what I can tell you is that I was someone who was very, very disciplined as far as like how I was showing up. I'm someone who has a lot of goals, who tries to, you know I have these goals and I have all of this, yet I realized that I was running on a nervous system where I was very like I was had a lot of anxiety all the time.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
And that anxiety translated into mobilization, which was like, I'm someone that even though I can feel a little bit of anxious and nervousness, my nervous system is wired to take action immediately.
Hmm.
Sometimes taking action can come with having anxiety. I'll give you an example. Um, in my career, in my job, I've noticed that whenever there's a challenge, I immediately like I can feel like tension in my belly. I can feel
Hmm.
tension and I'm like, okay, I need to get this done.
Hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm connected with my body. A lot of people are um, they show up to this reality they encounter and you meet people and you're always thinking, but if you think about it, we live in a capitalist society,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so we're trained to always be on the go,
yeah.
on the go,
On the grind.
on the grind. And what led me to here was that I had a small little accident where I was driving and I was just going to the dentist appointment and I realized that wanted to get there really quickly and this need to get to places very fast.
Mm,
And
I
that's
have
when,
that too.
yeah, see? And
Yeah.
how when I mentioned this to you, I noticed that your mind, you kind of had like this sort of, what was like the first initial thought when I shared this to you?
Yeah, so I have gotten many speeding tickets in my life. I'm not even gonna tell you how many speeding tickets, but one thing about me I notice is that I have a tendency to rush. Like speeding is the best example, but sometimes like I'll rush through paperwork or I'll rush through like
Mm,
studying. So I noticed that I had this tendency to rush, which and it's funny because and I think I know where it comes from. The reason why is because it's actually useful like 85% of the time. So that's actually where it comes from because this ability to like rush and move fast is actually very, very useful the vast majority of the time. But then some 15% of the time about it hurts, it gets the speeding tickets, it's, messing up on paperwork. So that's actually, I believe, it's kind of like good and bad at the same time?
yeah, and I think really. that's really what led me to sort of understand why I was always in a rush,
Mm,
and why
mm,
I was operating like this. And just like you, my perception about it is, well, I'm being very productive and
yeah.
I'm obtaining what I want. And
Mhm,
so that was sort of like the story that I kept telling myself
mhm,
until I got into this accident and I
mhm,
realized, wait, um, you really need to start slowing down
mhm,
because what if you were getting into an accident and God forbid someone was there and that person got hurt, right?
mhm, mhm,
And that's when we start to think about how we're actually operating in our lives. So that accident led me to start questioning, wait, why am I always in a rush?
mhm,
Like, why can I not just take my time? And so then I started observing my patterns in my from the way I eat, right? It
mhm.
starts from the way you eat too,
Interesting.
because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
I
start
eat
eating,
really fast.
it's your nervous system,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Your nervous system. And it's a lot of us who live under this capitalist society where we're trained like it's always like work, 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 work.
Yep, yep.
And so goals and like this sort of it's like this sort of narrative that society has conditioned all of us and our
Mhm,
bodies
mhm.
to be programmed
Yeah.
to behave and to respond. But really, that's not normal, right? Because your nervous system is in survival mode all the time. Your
Yeah, yeah.
brain, even though you think you're not doing something, like, oh, I'm just going to work really quickly,
Mhm.
but your brain in that response is actually telling your brain that you're in survival mode all the time.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is that you don't truly become present. And even when you're eating, if you're like eating very quickly, you're still responding on survival mode. So
Mhm.
taking the time to eat slow, right? It's very
I'm
hard.
bad at that, man.
It's difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
And and that's that is sort of a reflection to tell you how long we've been conditioning our bodies to be wired this way,
We're always thinking about the next thing, right?
always. And so one thing I've noticed in this challenge and why I say it's been a roller coaster for me
Mhm,
has been because I have had to learn how to slow down. And don't
mhm.
get me wrong, like sometimes I'm eating and I want to eat very quickly and
Yeah, same.
I have to remind myself, like, wait, no one's out to come and get you. Like, you're having a meal, learn to chew slowly. You're telling your brain now, you're activating your nervous system, your parasympathetic, which is like the part of your nervous system where you start to, like
Yeah,
relax,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so when you chew your food slower, you
You relax more.
metabolize it and you digest it
Mhm.
and you actually end up feeling fuller, right? This entire like orchestration occurs in the body when you take your time. And so yeah, it's been a roller coaster for me because just like you, Christian, I'm someone who's always like on the go very quickly.
I mean, like in a society where the vast majority of people are living check to check and where the average person has like three jobs and people, just can't pay the bills, like that's gonna happen, and like I don't know, like I definitely am someone who moves too fast in certain situations. But like, how do you, what do you tell someone who has, let's say, like two, three kids and like two jobs, like, and that gets like 5 hours of sleep a night? Like, what do you even tell that person? Because it's like our bills, we have to pay our bills. You know what I mean? So like, what do you even tell that person?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned this to me because this is something that I actually started shifting my
Mhm,
perspective a lot
mhm.
about. Because, like you said, we are in a society right now where people live paycheck by paycheck, and
Yeah,
no one
yeah.
has the luxury to,
Slow
no one
down.
has the luxury to, I wouldn't say slow down. I think there are powerful ways for us to connect back to our bodies,
Hmm.
and that's as simple as becoming more educated about learning your nervous system. I think it always comes down to curiosity, right? Um, so, first and foremost, I would completely, if I was to sit down with a mom of who has four kids, I was raised by a father who raised 4 kids and whose nervous system now is like doesn't stop,
Wow.
he
Mhm.
can't sleep,
Wow.
and so when I look back, I say I totally understand the system is not here to support you.
It
It's
never calmed down from
it
before.
doesn't support us,
Hmm.
we can start off with transportation. We can start off with the amount of traffic, how long someone gets to, to their house, to then to cook for the kids,
Hmm.
like the commute to work, all of this, right? It doesn't come just from an individual. I mean, it's not just individual, it's collective, right? And how the system is created to put us in this situation.
Hmm.
But I would start off by telling this person first, are you curious to become more connected with yourself? Right? Do you understand your nervous system? Do you even know what your nervous system is? Right? Because it starts there. If someone who's a mother who has 3 kids, 4 kids doesn't stop,
Hmm.
I always say that that person has to be the person who is more has to prioritize themselves even more because they have an entire
Yeah.
house under them, right?
That rely on them.
That rely on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would start off first by introducing them to learning the nervous system, right? It's as simple as what do you know about what is a nervous system, because a lot of people aren't unaware, or they have all this massive information out there. So I start off with curiosity, right?
Hmm.
The second would be if this person's willing to sort of time manage themselves better, because the system itself isn't there to really support them, but
Yeah.
there are ways that you can manage your time better.
Hmm.
And so it really comes down to making at least 10 to 15 minutes, like I said, even when you're sitting down. Your kids, if you're a mother and you're operating all the time on the go, your kids are going to start adapting your nervous system unconsciously, because they always see you, or you're a parent, if you see your parent always on the rush, always on
Yeah.
the go.
Yeah.
As a little kid, you start to adapt your parents' nervous system as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that carries on, and it's very important that first and foremost, that mother or that father um, starts to become curious as to how they've been operating, right? And there's tools out there. And I would love to talk more about it. And if you have any other questions about it, but there's tools out there. One of them that I just mentioned was when you're eating, right? Taking your time to eat,
Hmm.
gathering all of that. When you're with your kids, taking the time to show your kids how to eat slower. All of that are small little things that will play out like in the long term with a lot of good benefits.
Yeah. Eating slowly is like I'm the worst at that. I don't know why. I've just always like, because when you're hungry, it's like you just want to get full as soon as possible. It's definitely something I need to work on as well. I also think that sleep is really, really important. I don't know how you feel about sleep, because some people kind of have the mentality of like sleep is the cousin of death and all this. Um, it's like every few months I keep hearing something new about sleep. Like for example, I recently heard that getting a full night of sleep helps us regulate our emotions. It affects our memory, our nervous system. It pretty much affects our entire body. So I think that getting a full night of sleep is really, really important. I think. What do you think?
Absolutely. No, I mean, science backs that up. I mean,
Hmm.
your sleep is actually the healing process of the body. It's how the
Yeah.
body break down everything.
Yeah.
It's the restoration of whatever
Hmm.
you went through. It restores everything. Your cells start to work better at night, to process everything throughout the day. That's from everything, right? And so I think sleep is very important. I do
Hmm.
believe that some people are gifted. There's people that can sleep for 3 hours, no, 4 hours or 3 hours, and they
Yeah.
can operate
Yeah.
nonstop.
Hmm.
But not necessarily say that, they're unhealthy. I know a lot of people that, are only taking 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and,
Yeah.
they're still finding ways to take care of, they're in great shapes. Some people have that gift, but
Hmm.
majority of the population, like we do need our 8 hours of sleep. And that's important. But going back, I'm curious to know more as to you've said that you every time you eat, you want to, you get so hungry, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You eat. How long have you been aware? Like, because I noticed you said, you mentioned I need to work on that,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
When was there the time where you realized like, oh wait, this is something that I should work on? Well, when did you get this sort of calling?
Yeah, so I've that's a good question. So I've been eating fast my whole life. Again, like it's one of those things where like so for example, I used to be a school safety officer and our lunch break was only 30 minutes. And
Hmm.
that's not just the eating time, that's even the time to like go out and get the food and come back and all that. So like again, like it's one of those things where like it actually very often comes in handy, when you're in a rush on your lunch break or like, I used to resell sneakers and I used to like eat really, really quick and then go back out. And like, again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's useful actually, I would say the majority of the time, but then like sometimes it's like, wait, like if I'm in my own home, where it's like, wait, like I'm eating too fast now. So it's sort of like what was adaptive kind of becomes maladaptive later on. And I know, I believe that there are health benefits, and you probably know way more than me, but I think there are many physiological health benefits to eating slowly. Am I right in saying that?
Well, yeah, of course. One of the things that I mentioned was that you actually metabolize your
Hmm.
food, and
Hmm.
you help the digestion process of
Hmm.
it. In fact, a lot of people are not aware, but even though you're going to the restroom, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually everything comes out. A lot of things build up in your gut. That's why
Hmm.
it's very important that you do a parasite cleanse, a gut detox.
Hmm.
This is no, this is not very advertised, right? A lot of people don't tell you this, but recently I started devouring myself into understanding why it's so important for us to do a liver detox
Hmm.
once in our life, or make it I would say make it sort of an annual thing, right? Where you have to detox do a cleanse, right? Think about a car. You get your oil change in your car all the time, right?
Yeah.
What do you think that because you go to the restroom that things don't stay in your stomach? Of course they do. In
Hmm.
fact, there's been a lot of people that have come up that said that, when they have gone through a liver detox, there's even rocks that come out, worms that come out. It's
Hell.
insane. Yes, because the thing is, you have to think about your stomach, right? Have you seen how like your gut looks, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like a pipe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not all of that
Hmm.
comes out.
Hmm.
That's years of food, and if you're not eating your food, if you're not taking your time to eat your food, that food doesn't process. It can get stuck there, and that's how you. There's a lot of sicknesses and diseases that can come because of not doing either a juice cleanse or something like that, like a liver detox cleanse or a parasite cleanse. It's so important, but unfortunately the system doesn't want you to know these things, right?
Hmm.
But it's very important because if you don't do these cleanses, that's going to result in a lot more anxiety. It's going to result more in brain
Hmm.
fog,
Hmm.
depression.
Hmm.
The gut is correlated to your mind. I was someone that was very I was someone I used to truly believe that the subconscious mind was the ruler of everything.
Hmm.
But then I started realizing that your mind is everywhere in your body. Like your neurons are found in your gut, neurons are found in your liver, neurons are found everywhere in your body.
Hmm.
Neurons are not just on your brain, right? So your brain is like entirely your body as well. So all of that will play out in the terms of the thoughts and how you're operating, right? And eventually it will catch up to you. So that's why I'm very interested right now in just doing an entire, which was something that I've been focusing on, is how can I start to look at myself from a pure like body physiology perspective and not just my mind.
Yeah, I would love to talk about these detoxes because I've actually never had any of those detoxes. I've heard of like, not, I've never heard of the parasite detox, and you mentioned a liver detox. Like, I have no idea what that's like. Tell
Yeah.
us what that's like.
Yeah, so I can tell you a little bit about a
Mhm.
parasite cleanse, right?
Mhm.
Plays in other countries, it's very normal to do a parasite cleanse. Somehow here in the United States, we're so not aware of how, how much we should be doing this. But this goes back to even back in Egypt, and the Egyptians would do like these cleanses, right?
Really?
Because they would believe that, yeah, because they would believe that you had to cleanse the internal body as well. Like that there's a spiritual aspect as well
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
cleansing your body. That's why a
Hmm.
lot of people fast. If you hear a lot of religion, they do like these water day fasts, right? Why do you think they do these water day fasts, right? It's not just it goes beyond just the spiritual, but also there's a benefit to the body, right? It starts to the cells, once you start fasting, your body actually starts healing itself. You give your body a break. And so I'll share more about the parasite cleanse, right? um like I truly believe that everything in this reality is connected.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I started learning about parasites, it was like a Tuesday night. And I was just like, I had this intuitive calling to start learning about, like, what are these parasites? Why am I getting this intuitive calling? And then this happened Tuesday. So I started researching about how, like, in countries like in Mexico, it's very normal for, especially little kids to get these
Mm-hmm.
parasite cleanses
Mm-hmm.
and adults to get these parasite cleanses annually, which is here. I mean, look, people go all their life, they've never done these detoxes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it made me question, why is this information not being shared? Why is this information not being shared or not being popularized here in the Western culture? And so this was Tuesday, and I started learning more. On Thursday, I get a call from someone that I hadn't spoken to in years. This person found me somehow, decided to try to contact me. And so then we jumped on a conversation. And this person's also big in the wellness industry.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned to me, have you ever thought about doing a parasite cleanse? And I said, what? I was just looking, researching this on Tuesday. And somehow here you come. I have not spoken to in years. And then you asked me, have I ever been interested in doing a parasite cleanse? And so that itself was sort of like, this is a sign that I need to do this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And and this is why I believe that there's everything is so connected,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I had this intuitive calling to start learning about this. And here I am. I get a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. And never did I thought this person would ask me about a parasite cleanse. Turns out this person does these cleanses himself. And he told me, look, start doing this because I was feeling anxiety. And once I started cleansing myself, my body, the anxiety was like reduced. I was able to sleep better. And it all, like, everything like is a reflection of how you are internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, you're so the system, right? You mentioned something very important. You would go in your job, they would only give you 30 minutes
Yeah,
to eat.
yeah.
That's not right. That's how
Mm-hmm.
the system has
Mm-hmm.
conditioned all of us to be
Mm-hmm.
operating so quickly, right?
Yeah, yep, yep.
And so it starts off from like the community, from the collective, right? And how the system doesn't, we're always in a rush.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding this and understanding how all of this sort of affects us, I've now realized, like, even though it's like this, I have to find ways to control myself and to understand my nervous system and befriend it and be able to slow down. When you train your mind to start slowing down, it's not easy. When you start training your mind and the way you eat everything, it will start reflecting whenever you're, in a problem or in a challenge in your career, or you encounter some sort of challenge in life. You're going to realize that your response is going to be slower. You're actually going to take the time to not like rush or get into that sort of hyperactive fight and flight sort of survival response, right? Because you're training your body to now start slowing down.
Yeah, so can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Did did you used to, or do you still have a lot of racing thoughts?
Not as before, not as before. And I think that now, because I understand the power that comes with really understanding my nervous system and starting to look at everything, right? Not just from my individual, uh, not just from an individual lens, but also see it from my parents, right? How my parents, what were my parents' nervous system, right? And what was I so used to as a little girl, seeing what's normal and what's responding to challenges was normal, right? Because when you're a little kid, you see everything.
Yep.
You know?
You
You see,
absorb it.
you observe everything, and majority of what we observe is non-verbal,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
It's all how we feel because the person around us can translate their feelings to us. It's called mirror neurons.
Yep.
Like your parents, even though they were probably not never told you, hey, this is what's going on, you knew something was wrong with your parents,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
something that you, as humans, we feel our each other's nervous system, right?
Hmm.
So I had to really look at myself and say, wait, I don't want to be 40 and 50 and then realize that I have a chronic illness, right? Because
Hmm.
that's really how chronic illnesses start, is when you are not aware of calming the body because it's always on survival mode and your
Yeah.
cells
Yeah.
are always survival.
Hmm.
And that's why they say stress is one of like the slowest killers. It's the silent
Yep.
killers.
Yep. Yep.
So it really comes down to, I think I was very curious to start learning about my nervous system. I started
Hmm.
looking into the body and observing my body. And so I started changing my nutrition. I went, I invested very into like trying to eat as healthy as possible, as clean as possible, and just trying to see how experiment. How do I feel after I start changing the way I eat? After I start changing how fast or how slow I eat, start changing the
Hmm.
minuscule habits, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The minuscule habits, because I think I was someone who was so focused on like the bigger habits,
Hmm.
right? And like obtaining the bigger habits, but it really starts down in the smallest little things, because in the long term, you start to train and you start to condition your body, right? And so when you operate you're never going to have a perfect nervous system, but you have to learn how to regulate it, right? So if I'm next to someone who is upset, right,
Hmm.
and I immediately get upset, it's how I decide to regulate that sort of frustration and anger, right? Because
Hmm.
it's normal for me to feel the frustration.
Right. Right.
Then it's really, really, it comes down to the regulation. What am I going to do now that I know that I'm upset in my body? How can
Hmm.
I regulate this? And it comes down to a lot of techniques. And so I think it's like I said, it's individual, but also understanding and being curious that there is a system that influences us as well. And so if we want to show up in this world to create a change, when I do encounter people whose nervous systems I can feel, because you're going to feel, right?
Yeah.
When
No
someone's
matter what.
upset and angry, or when someone's in a
Yeah.
rush, or
Hmm.
it like has anxiousness,
Hmm.
you'll feel that without them even telling you,
Hmm.
right? So then if you feel that, it's gonna affect you. So then when you start to calm down and you start tuning into it, by you tuning into it, the other person can change. It's insane. I thought it was very interesting how once we start to regulate our nervous system, even the people around us will
Yeah.
feel the
Yeah.
calmness.
Yeah, I think emotions are extremely contagious. I don't think that people even realize how contagious emotions are. I notice that when I'm around people who are more happy, it rubs off on me. And same thing with anxiety, same thing with sadness, anger. Emotions are incredibly contagious. So even when it comes to like mindsets, like if someone constantly has the victim mentality, it's gonna kind of rub off on the people around you. Um, you said something very very important, talking about how negative emotions, no matter what, we're going to feel them. And what I learned about the human brain and the nervous system is that the human brain is its goal is to survive not to be happy. So like it gives us these negative emotions, like anxiety, for example, to help us survive. Now the happiness is on us. Like that's where we have to like, eat slower and take a deep breath and meditate and all that. But like the human brain, its job is to help us survive. And that's
Yes.
the reason why it even gives us these negative emotions in the first place, to help us stay alive, not to help us be happy. That's our job.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think it's very interesting to start looking at our perspective, our emotions from a survival standpoint.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a reason why we feel grief, right? Grief allows us to pause, you know,
And
um,
think.
yeah, and to think.
Hmm.
If we don't experience grief, we're never going to learn how to sort of respond to it, right? And there's a reason why, we feel anger or why we feel fear. I mean,
Yeah.
fear is a popular emotion, which is sort of a survival. The
Yeah.
reason why you feel fear is because when there is something that is going to be like in a life-threatening situation, you're meant to experience that fear so you can mobilize that emotion, right? So our emotions are always here to teach us something. They're always here to teach us something. Now, it's when we stop being curious, right? And when we stop and we start judging them, that's when the problems and the resistance comes up, and majority of the emotions start getting stored in our body, which then affects from our posture,
Hmm.
right?
Mm.
So I like going into looking at myself from a pure body physiological perspective now. I even started to analyze people's posture, right?
That's
And
interesting.
yes,
Let me
it's
fix my posture really quick.
uh, well, I if you can tell me, right? Like if you will look at yourself, have you ever paid attention to your posture? Would you say that if you have like like what are the natural habits unconsciously, right, of how you stand or how you hold your hands or all of these things, right? I just saw you have a thought there. I just
You're very analytical.
No, it's because I'm so fascinating with
Uh,
the body, right? And how right now, like there's so much happening here, right?
mhm, mhm,
But this is very fascinating.
mhm.
Posture is one of those. Posture is very important. Posture is known to be the way. If you have a good posture, you're going to recover. You're going to recover faster when
Mm,
you're as far as mood recovery,
yeah.
as far as confidence, as far as emotional regulation. Like if I was to tell you, Christian, just like slant your posture
Slouch.
right now,
Slouch.
slouch, just
Uh-huh.
slouch,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if you said if you slouched, right, like right now I'm slouching, and I'm like I feel like really bad right now. I feel really
I
sad.
hate slouching. It
Yeah,
hurts my back.
but we all do this whenever
Yeah.
we unconsciously,
Mhm,
we all will slouch
mhm.
whenever we're experiencing some sort of emotion. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
For
yeah.
me, the emotion when I start to slouch like this is when I feel hopeless, right? And I get
Mm,
sad, right? And I
mhm,
just like stay like this, right?
mhm,
And so when one thing I've realized, right, if you feel this way, I feel hopeless, right?
mhm.
Once you start to say that, but you kind of upright in a posture like this, you can say I feel hopeless, but it's not going to give you the same feeling internally. It's insane how much posture plays a role in our emotions, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I see someone like this, right, with their slouch posture, I can
Mhm,
get this
mhm,
impression that this person probably has felt very shut down in the world, right?
mhm,
And they're
mhm,
so used to feeling this way,
mhm,
years of trauma, years of
mhm.
emotions, where they're just like this, right?
Baggage.
That baggage, right? And so approaching that person, not from saying, hey, get your posture up, but instead of like, understanding why, or like what is this person? What is this person's story? Like, what I'm curious to know why this person has been like this their entire life, right? And you'll notice there's also postures where people are more like this, right? So it shows aggressiveness. It could be like so there's so much to the body, right, that we're unaware of.
Yeah.
And so that right now, what I'm very fascinating right now is how the body is a reflection of the emotion and the internal dialogue because it's unconscious. It's the unconscious. It's what's suppressed. It's what's been holding. So I'm very fascinated with that right now. And I'm currently, like I said, also improving my posture
Mhm.
and finding ways because there's a lot of benefits. Like I said, mood recovery, confidence,
Yeah.
uh, and when you are feeling sad, that sort of technique of like feeling and putting your posture up again will help you regulate the emotions even better.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the saying, fake it until you make it. Like it, it, the question, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Like, okay, does it start with the emotions or does it start with the posture? Because like if you're sad, you might tend to slouch, but then at the same time, if you pick yourself up and straighten out your back, then you might start to feel better. So it's kind of like they kind of go hand in hand. And you mentioned we did talk about food a little bit, right? And I noticed on your TikTok that you pay a lot of attention to what you consume, your diet, and you seem to be I think you cut out sugar
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
completely, or
so right now, I did the when I was doing the parasite cleanse, I cut out the sugar completely. Right now, I've started. One of the focuses right now for me is building muscle. So
Mhm.
I am having, like, for instance, carbs as far as like I had pasta, which I know it does have high levels of glucose, but I get gluten-free pasta.
Oh,
Um,
really? How
but
does
I
that
don't
taste?
it's not bad. I
Yeah.
like it. And I personally love like my the way I choose my carbs. I try to educate myself on like what carbs are better. Since right now my priority is not doing a parasite cleanse, I think I'm going to do it again. It's calling me again, but right now my priority is to build muscle. And so even when I'm having the choice of carbs that I have, I know I'm going to have like an apple or a pasta that's high quality, or like sweet potato over white potatoes. Like, there's specific carbs that are healthier. So as far as refined sugar, yes, I do not have refined sugar. I do not like drink any soda. I do not partake in all of that because I understand now how much that affects my ability to show up in this world and my
Yeah.
ability. I do not want to be controlled by some sort of something within me, like
Mhm.
that's why I'd say like parasites control people. Sometimes when you're getting cravings, it's not usually you. There can also be things that, internally that are signaling to your brain, go get some sugar,
Mhm.
and you would have not known that. It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating to understand how sugar can play such a big effect
Yeah.
on the brain.
I mean, sugar, I should do I need to cut out sugar myself because it it's one of those things that are very, very addicting and that are very, very difficult to cut out because we're surrounded by it. But it comes with like so many physiological, like there's so many different diseases that are linked with sugar. And I'm wondering, you said that your goal was to gain muscle. I'm wondering like what inspired you to gain muscle.
So, first and foremost, there was a study that was done. I don't know from the back of my head what the study was, but they wanted to study two types of groups. The first type of group were people who had, I mean, both of these groups were diagnosed with cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first group was diagnosed with cancer, and they had no muscle in their bodies.
Mm.
The second group was diagnosed with cancer as well, but they had a lot of body muscle, skeletal muscle that they had because they were working out. Guess what group survived and overcame the cancer?
I would assume the muscular group.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Muscle is vital to longevity. Muscle is vital to how you're going to, as far as like how you're going to respond,
Mhm.
your immune system. Muscle is very, very important. And as we age, our muscle starts to decrease. I think by the age of 30, your muscle starts declining, right? And
Yeah.
so like, if you are not prioritizing your muscle,
Mhm.
what ends up happening is that then you start to posture starts to increase. That's why you see a lot of people, right?
Yep.
And did you know that when you have a sleek pouch posture, you can even form cavities because your neck is not being held up straight, and that can form your entire how your teeth are built.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yes. So that's why it's so important, right? And not to say that, you can't change. Of course you can change. But the thing is, a lot of people wait too late to change.
Mhm.
And so really, this is why I was very fascinated with like, okay, I'm 29 now. How do I want to age? Like, how do I want to go? And I think that the body needs to be challenged. We cannot be comfortable. And if you keep telling yourself it's difficult, your body listens to that all the time,
Mhm.
right? So if you keep saying this is difficult, your mind is you're feeding your mind and your subconscious mind by telling yourself it's difficult, and that's what's going to result, and that's what's going to be manifest, right? But if
Mhm.
you approach this like, okay, let me experiment, let me just see how this
Mhm.
feels, right? And so approaching your this habit or this change from a curiosity perspective, you'll start to realize that okay, less resistance and more adaptive. You start becoming more adapted to change.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also wondering, like, what about because my uric acid is actually pretty high, and I try to eat as little red meat as possible. So I'm wondering, like, what your thoughts are on red meat.
So I would start off first, even to before I even like this is something that I'm specializing right now is to
Mhm.
help people is first and foremost, I want to start off. It's not just, it doesn't just come down to the foods that you have.
Mhm.
It comes
Mhm.
down to the nervous system first,
Mhm.
right? Because you can eat very healthy, but you can still have like high levels of cortisol if you're someone who's stressed all the time,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
who doesn't like cannot emotionally regulate, right?
Mhm.
And you see this a lot with people who are high entrepreneurs who are nonstop, majority of high entrepreneurs. I mean, I wasn't aware, but Adderall is very like popular, right?
Yeah.
Adderall
Yeah.
is a substance to get, people going and
Yep.
nonstop.
Yep.
A lot of times, there's substances that keep these people going, right? And so eventually it catches up to you. But I would start off by first asking you,
Mhm.
right? Do you know your nervous system? Do you even know a little bit about how you, because you mentioned you're always on the go, you're always on the fast.
Mhm.
And then I think there's a little bit of like, oh, but it's useful, right? Which
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
agree it is useful,
Mhm.
but I
Mhm.
think that have you been curious to know if that's been helping you?
Yeah. So I definitely did slow down. So I'm 36 now. When I was like I would say like 29 to like 32, I was like pretty much working 24/7. I was a school safety officer in the morning, then I would go resell sneakers, then I would Uber, then I was pretty much working 24/7. And in retrospect, I wouldn't really say I regret it because it gave me, a lot of financial stability. But when I was 32, I did resign from school safety, and I decided, let me slow down. I remember one thought that I used to have was, I'm never working this hard again. Like once I hit 10 years on school safety, I'm vested. I'm like, I'm still gonna work, but I'm not gonna work like this. Um, so when I
Mm.
was 32, I did quit school safety. I started to slow down. I started to get a healthy amount of sleep because back then I was getting like 6 to 7 hours, and my body needs like at least 9 hours, I feel like. So I definitely slowed down. I still work, I would say maybe 40 to 45 hours a week. But I definitely slowed down for sure, and I started, to put my mental health first, and I feel much better. I'm not gonna say that I regret that guy that was working like 24/7, but I definitely feel a lot more at peace, nervous system wise, mental health wise, just working like 45 hours a week as opposed to like 70.
Can I ask you, what really was, why did you have to work so much? Like, is it because of the conditioning? Like, did you have someone dependent on, like, who was dependent on you, or where did this drive come from?
No, that's a great question. I didn't have to. My bills were relatively low. I have no kids, so I didn't have to. but I wanted to milk the opportunities. Like I have friends who are very very entrepreneurial, very successful. Some of them are millionaires, and they inspire me. They're very inspirational. When I was in school safety, you're vested after 10 years, which means after 10 years you get a pension. So that was my motivation to stay for 10 years. And then I used to resell sneakers. Sneakers used to be like very, very easy and a lot of money. The market isn't as good as it used to be. Not to talk too much about money, but like I wanted to milk the opportunity. So I didn't have to work that hard, but I knew that the opportunities were there, and I learned in life that like when it's there, you got to milk it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And so, why I asked this question to you is because, I mean, you mentioned you've been doing it for so long, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
you've been, conditioning your body,
Hmm.
right? That now you're not in that state anymore. I'm not sure if it's that's still your objective to try to go out there and do as much. Um, but do you ever feel now that there's still a part of you that wants more, 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 more? Or do you feel like you're completely satisfied where you're at in life?
Completely satisfied? I wouldn't say completely. One thing about me that I don't really talk about this too much on, in public, but like I'm honestly a pretty money hungry guy, to be honest. Like I'm like that, like get rich, like $100 million. Like I'm pretty money hungry, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I still try to, get as much as I can while still maintaining sleep, while still seeing my friends and family. It is my goal I'm in my master's program right now for social work. I eventually want to own my own clinic as a therapist, so that's in the works.
That's
But yeah, there's definitely a large part of me that's still like, you know, that's still hungry.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, So are you willing to right now, like, are you willing to sort of take your Christian now and experiment to see what Christian would be like if you were to completely start optimizing your body from regulating your nervous system to changing the way you eat? Would you ever be curious to see how that Christian would be responding or how that Christian would not just be, right? Because that Christian exists as well.
Mm.
Um, is that something that calls you, or you're just more like, I'm
No,
gonna
so I do work out. I could eat healthier for sure. I've never had like any sort of cleanse, and I honestly never even heard of like the parasite cleanse, or I've never heard of these things. I did have a great uncle who had like a bunch of parasites in his body, and he
really?
he actually passed away from that. So I should definitely look into that. But I think
Wow.
yeah, this was a while ago, but I
And
think that we live.
and
What?
how I'm curious, how old were you when you found out he had that? Is it like your mom's brother, or
Yeah,
is
my mom's uncle. So this was a lot. This was like maybe like 15 years ago. So I was a kid when I didn't know anything. I only met him like once or twice because he lives in Cali. But yeah, I think it was the food he ate. I think he ate some sort of food, and then the parasites had kids, and then they just kept growing, and he passed away from that. Yeah, yeah,
that's how insane and dangerous these things are, you know?
yeah.
And
That's the
even
first person I thought about when you mentioned parasites. He's the first one I thought about.
Yeah. And even people who are healthy, like
Yeah.
you wouldn't even know, like, this is just this one story that I heard of a woman who was a fitness trainer, incredible physique. Yet
Mhm.
she went to the doctor and they diagnosed her as pre-diabetic. And she was
Yeah.
like, how is this even possible? Like, I eat super healthy.
Yeah.
And the doctors were telling you that she was pre-diabetic, and so she was changing. She went from being into a keto diet, changing her nutrition, but it's until she started to doing a cleanse of giving her body a break of of allowing her body to start not having anything but give your body a full break, when she started to realize, holy crap, like I really did not even know I had this in me.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that it's probably genetic. Like she probably has parents who are pre-diabetic, and maybe even stress. Like you said, stress. It,
No,
it's really it's
it's it's not genetic. It's actually it can come from anywhere. Like it can
Hmm.
come from
Hmm.
anywhere. Like
Hmm.
you can go outside and you can step on like the grass and you can get parasites through there. If you have dogs, you can get if your
Hmm.
dogs are not getting parasite, you can
Hmm.
get parasites through your dogs.
Hmm.
You can get parasites if you're eating raw fish. Like
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what he ate. Yeah, but as
yeah,
far as diabetes goes, that's mostly genetic, isn't it? Diabetes. Yeah.
Diabetes is genetic, but it comes down to lifestyle as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
So it's parasites are always there. Like even if you don't, if you have like your water and you're showering and you don't have a filter in your shower,
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
get parasites through the water.
Oh
Like
man,
that's
that's
how
scary.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying that. It's
Yeah.
insane. Like it's inevitable. They're
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And so what comes down to it's not really genetic. It's more like they're everywhere. This is why they say like if you go to another country, like for instance, if you go to like, other third world countries, you're more delicate, right?
Yeah.
Compared to
Yeah.
those people who are so used to being in that environment where their immune systems are so prone. And so when you're someone who's not sort of conditioned to be in that environment, you're more likely to catch a parasite through
Yeah.
that environment because your immune system is not the same.
Because your body is not adapted to that particular environment. It's only adapted to, whatever environment you came from or where you live. So I was curious, Z. So I kind of want, I wrote down a few topics and I kind of wanted to jump back to, a few things from our first podcast. Is that okay?
Of course, of course.
So, in our first podcast, you talked a little bit about like how you used to be very controlling.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
would like to talk, I would like some sort of update. Like, are you still that controlling way? Have you slowed down? How are you today?
I mean, the controlling is always going to be there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I'm a woman who's very highly ambitious,
Hmm.
but I understand now that there's the controlling starts with me, right? I cannot control what others do around me. And
Hmm.
still, it is a little like obviously, as you start to get older, you start to look at things in such a different perspective. So I think that the controlling really starts within me. And so right now, I practice a lot of self-control, right? And so self-control to me is like I said, I'm someone who has the ability to control what I choose to take in, not just from my mental perspective, but what I choose to eat.
Hmm.
So I think that the controlling is there from that perspective. As far as controlling others,
Hmm.
I'm at a stage in my life right now where your energy is my energy is so important, right? And so how I choose to use my energy is very important. So if I choose to worry about what's around me or to worry about what others are doing, then that's only going to prevent me and stop me from focusing on what I want to do. So I would say that I've gotten much more better, but as far as the controlling aspect, it's still there. I think it's one of the biggest benefits to me
Hmm.
is because I have a lot of self-control.
Hmm.
And so I have control over me. And so and that has played and has benefited me in so much, you know. So I would say that that's gotten better. I've learned to detach from the external outcomes and aspects and really start to adapt that sort of wanting to control, but for the better for myself.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're more focused on controlling yourself and your body and your mind as opposed to others. I have a friend who told me a while back, he's like one of the most impulsive people that I know, and
Mhm.
he said, self-control is everything. And it really is like everything starts with self-control. And I've heard another quote that, everything starts with the food you eat. So kind of like it brings us back to a full circle. And I'm curious, like how did you gain self-control over the years? Because it sounds to me like you've gained a lot of self-control over the years. How did you manage that?
How did I gain self-control was by allowing myself to experience my reality where I had no control.
Hmm.
I had sort of like I was someone who was easily triggered.
Hmm.
I was someone who didn't care about sort of bettering myself, where I found an excuse to, I sort of had to experience that version of myself where I
Mhm.
just chose to not have any self-control. And so that version allowed me to really learn and to make mistakes.
Mm.
And I think that, I guess because I was someone who had no self-control,
Mm.
and that's really what allowed me to start seeing, wait, what can I do now, and what can I shift, and how can I do this so that I can actually show up with more inner agency, right?
Mhm.
And so I always feel like inner agency is to me, inner agency is powerful, right? Like if you're someone who has inner agency, you know, you can be around so much chaos, but you decide how you want to respond to that, chaos. Now that you have the awareness, for instance, now that you have sort of the information as to how you operate, knowing now, for instance, um, learning my nervous system, right? If I know I'm someone that can easily get agitated, right? That I operate from more sympathetic, that I can have more anxiety. When I do encounter a situation where I have to respond, um, how do I choose to look and take care of myself then and there, right?
Mhm.
Do I choose to, take a breath and step back and observe the situation, or do I choose to just lash out,
Mhm.
and so that's been a learning sort of a learning roller coaster for me right now.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I do have a few more topics. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I think I'm enjoying this sort of,
Mhm.
I'm enjoying the flow of the
Mhm.
conversation. And I think that a lot of people may find useful to this information because there's a lot of usefulness to this conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Our first one was great, and I definitely I'm definitely learning a lot because it's in this one I'm noticing that you're talking a lot more about the human body and the physiology, which is great because as we established, there's a huge connection between our mental health and our body. And you mentioned the word anxiety many times, and I'm wondering like where it started.
My anxiety.
Yeah, like where did it start?
Well, I adapted a lot of my anxiety first came from um, being in a household where, like I said, my parents were always working, right? And so
Mm,
like I always would see how my parents, even though they wouldn't say anything, I picked up on a lot of things that my parents wouldn't say. And so growing up in a household where you would see your parents, where a child shouldn't see things like, not abused, but like my parents were always arguing, they were always
mm,
responding very quickly. And so
mm,
I also noticed that my dad was for someone who would get very frustrated.
mm,
And so I was always sort of in this environment where I had to like, had to be very careful. It sort of felt like I had to be on like little shells, like, and
eggshells.
yeah, all the time. And so I started learning that I started adapting this sort of way of like, oh my God, like my mind racing. And even though I was someone that was always hardworking, like I always wanted to work hard, I always found myself in jobs where I always overdid and I would always overdo
Mm,
and I would always say,
interesting.
I'm sorry, or I would always
Mm,
like, do like these, overextend myself, right? To sort of
mm,
be liked, to be chosen, to be, to be part of. And
mm,
then I realized that it really came down to my conditioning as a child. And,
mm, mm.
I mentioned that I had abandonment, I
Yeah,
experienced
yeah, yeah.
abandonment. So all of that sort of conditioned me to experience more anxiety, right? On
Mm,
top of the foods that I was having, because I was eating so much junk food.
mm,
So all of that led me to have obviously have a lot of anxiety. And so then when I started to look at myself and I started to say, wait, like start to observe my body and how I respond, that's when I started to learn, okay, like let's start to explore this without judgment. And so that's when I started making the change, the creating those habits, right? As simple as, like you said, If I have to eat slow, let me eat slower. If I have to go to work, let me slow down. And it's still a learning thing, I have to like do it. It's I still catch myself wanting to go fast. And it's like, wait, wait, wait. Remember that this is years of you conditioning yourself.
Mm,
And I've only been starting to befriend my nervous system for since I would say I started to befriend my nervous system from October of last year.
mm.
It's still, a little bit of months compared to years of me operating that way. That's what has felt safe for me for so long.
Moving fast felt safe.
Moving fast felt safe.
And I'm wondering, like, since you started to slow down, have there been like disadvantages, or have there been like, have you been late to meetings? Have you been late to work? Like, have you felt any sort of like disadvantages of moving slower?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm,
I have been slow, or sometimes I'm sorry, I have been late sometimes, or I have chosen to just decide I'm gonna take the day off. Like I don't want to,
mm,
I really being someone who was always so, being there and giving my all, and always because I'm so passionate and everything. I've also had to learn that there's power and taking time off for myself and to go back to myself. And I've noticed that when I choose to listen to myself, things even work out even better. And so I wouldn't say that there's been disadvantages. The only disadvantage is conditioning myself to have patience, because it's very frustrating. Even when I'm eating, I'm like, oh my God, I want to eat slower. And it's like, oh, it's impatient. I feel impatient with myself. But I think that's part of the process, is also being impatient to realize okay, I need to have more patience with myself. And so that's going to be reflected as well with the people around me.
yeah, I'm still thinking about the eating slower thing because like I've always ate fast, and it's just like this habit. I don't, I mean, I do know why, but it's like I'm curious, like like do you feel a big difference when you eat slower? Like what does do you feel a big difference?
Absolutely. For instance, I make it it's certain little stuff. Like for instance, when I eat, I choose to eat from a smaller plate. I put my food there,
Interesting.
and I notice that I get fuller faster, right? And so then
Mhm.
that allows me to be able to break down my food, and I feel much more clear, as far as I'm more present with my food, I'm more
Mm,
present with how I'm eating. And so because I'm conditioning and I'm learning that, what's going to keep happening is that it's going to be reflected also when I encounter challenges in my life, encounter challenges at my job, right?
mhm,
So that's why I think everything starts when you're by yourself,
mhm,
right? Everything that you encounter outside of you begins first internally, when you're intimate by yourself, when you're alone, and how you're choosing to respond when you're by yourself. So as far as benefits, yes, I feel fuller. I feel like I'm able to break down my food better. I feel like I taste my food better. I feel like I'm more present with my food. I feel more gratitude towards my food.
mm,
And so there's a lot more than just eating slow. Like I said, it's also allowing me to see how much years of conditioning I have been so used to. And your brain doesn't like to be challenged. Your body just feels uncomfortable. Your body just wants to be like, fuck it, I want to just eat fast,
yeah,
which I still catch myself doing. So
yeah,
it's like, okay, that's a response, right? That itself, and how I choose, how that frustration, that patience, that means that that's my response. So that means I need to work on that still. You get me? I'm still not at the point where I want to, I'm eating slower. I'm still training myself to do it.
Well, it's ironic because the more frustrated we are, the faster we want to eat. I do this weird thing actually a lot where like I'll wait until I'm super, super, super hungry and then I'll start eating. Like, is that like a sin? Like, is that really bad for my body?
So for instance, tell me a little bit as far as your how you eat, like what time of the day that you
Yeah.
eat.
So I'm gonna embarrass myself. So I usually have my first meal like later. Like I'll have my first meal at like 2, 3 p.m.
Okay.
I mean,
And then
I'll have a coffee. I'll have a coffee at work at the office. So I'll have a coffee maybe at like 11ish, and then I'll have my first meal at like 2 3 p.m. Yeah.
okay, and does it work for you? Do you feel like it works for you? Like the fasting, does it make you feel more energetic?
Yeah, I mean, I so my goal is to lose fat and gain muscle. So it does seem to work. I'm just wondering like if that's the healthiest, because some people say like don't skip breakfast, but like I mean, it does seem to be working. Like I
Oh,
feel I
okay.
feel happy doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So then it leads to when do you start getting hungry again after 2 o'clock, 2 p.m.? Like
And then
when
I'll
do
have my next meal after work. I'll have my next meal like 8:30. So I
okay.
usually do 2 meals a day. I don't do
Three
two,
meals
three.
a day. Okay,
Yeah,
two
yeah.
meals a day is, I think two
Mhm,
meals a day is good as long as they're
mhm,
nutritious.
mhm.
Um, and so do you ever find it difficult to go to sleep at night?
Generally, no. I mean, if I do, it's because of thoughts, but generally, no. Like 9 out of 10 times, I find it relatively easy to sleep.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, 8 o'clock is pretty late. I mean, I don't know how you
Yeah.
would feel because it takes about 2 hours for your body to
Digest, yeah.
digest the food.
Mhm,
But I feel like I feel like if you were to sort of decide to eat a little bit earlier than 8 o'clock, I think
mhm.
that those thoughts and like start to experiment whether or not those thoughts are still there, the racing
Mhm,
thoughts are still there.
mhm,
If you
mhm.
decide to eat earlier, right? Because sometimes food gives you more energy like throughout the day. And so what
Right.
that energy can translate in having more racing thoughts.
Well, I usually sleep around like 12 because my job starts at 11. So like if I'll eat at like 8, 8:30 around there, and then I'll sleep at like 12. So is that a sufficient amount of time?
I think, I mean, from what time to you, 12 to 11, you wake up in the
No, no, no.
morning,
I wake up around like 8ish.
8
Yeah.
in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're having like 7 hours of sleep.
About eight, about eight. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's enough. I think as long
Mhm.
as you're feeling good, it's just um it really comes down to how you've adapted to it, if you're seeing results in your
Mhm.
body and
Mhm.
what you're trying to do. Are you seeing results in being, I don't know, if you have anxiety, if you have that? It really comes down to like, you would only know that
Yeah.
because you see a change in you.
No, I see. So I mean, I'm pretty low in like negative emotions, but as far as like my body goes, I am seeing like small changes. But I definitely could eat healthier, and I definitely could work out more. It's just like it's just so hard to juggle everything. So I have one more topic in mind. Can I completely like switch
Yeah,
topics? It's
yeah.
it's a it's a completely separate topic. So this topic has actually been on my mind a lot lately. Like, if I am losing sleep, it's because of this topic.
Okay.
So I've been thinking a lot lately about like, and by a lot I mean like pretty much all day long, about like the dynamics between men and women, and like how women are very like often afraid of men, how like I'll be in an elevator and a woman will like scoot over to the side, or like how how like just like how just men and women tend to like a lot of mistreatment nowadays, and a lot of like men abusing women, women abusing men. So I'm curious, like I don't know where to start because I have so many questions, but like let's use the elevator as an example, okay? So let's just say like you're in an elevator with a man, a complete stranger. What do you feel? Do you feel any anxiety when that happens? None at all?
No. So I'm very interesting. I'm curious to know when did this topic start to get to you? Did you experience that within an elevator yourself? Were you
Well,
feeling
like I said, like okay, so this to me is a very very like I'm very emotionally attached to this topic. So
okay?
let's just say I'm in an elevator with a woman, or even like walking the street with a woman, like let's say I'm behind her or whatever. My automatic assumption is that she feels anxiety. Like my automatic assumption is she's nervous, I'm a man. Through her eyes I could be a murderer. Like my automatic assumption is that she's feeling anxiety.
So
What do you?
why do you think that happens? Why do you think that that comes across in your head, in your
That's a
mind?
good question. I mean, I've literally heard women say like, "I'm afraid of men." Like I've heard women say that, and like, there are a lot of crazy men out there, a lot of murderers, rapists, and like I've had like when I was dating around, I haven't been lately, but when I was, sometimes women would tell me like, "Sorry, I don't date strangers from online." So like I've sort of like gained this mentality of like women
Belief.
are afraid of men.
Yeah, yeah. Which is very interesting, right? Because our brains will filter that
Mhm.
belief
Mhm.
everywhere we go,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So if you sort of, we call this, right, projection in psychology,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Project whatever internally is happening, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
for instance, if I'm a woman, right, and I'll give you an example that I've learned throughout my years, perhaps maybe this would be vulnerable for me to share with you, but I want to share this with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, Growing up in a household full of men,
Yeah.
I was very conditioned to believe that men were, don't trust men in that aspect. Like, if I would, come to my brother, he's like, "Oh, don't trust a guy," or like, you trust me, we're guys, we know what we're saying." So I grew up in sort of that sort of environment that influenced that sort of, even though I wouldn't say I wasn't a woman that say I don't trust men. Um, I was in my reality, I was projecting that without saying it, right? So I was encountering a lot of men who would hold back, right? Or who wouldn't fully be as expressive, and so that made me also suppress my emotions, or suppress my vulnerability, or suppress like speaking up and vocalizing, right? And so it took years for me to realize that my conditioning was shaping my belief systems, right? And so it comes down to what you're watching. It comes down to even listening to stories where people
Yeah.
share with you about what they've
Mhm.
encountered.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because if you're in the realms of being a therapist, right, that's something that you, as a therapist, you have to learn how to detach yourself from these stories, because we
Mhm.
can quickly become sponges to them, and then we can start experiencing that in our reality if we're not careful, right?
Mhm.
So I started realizing that unconsciously I was projecting this belief, and so that sort of made me attract men who were not attached, who were always like working, who weren't as expressive, who weren't vulnerable, who wouldn't express themselves. And I would always ask myself, why was I attracting this same thing? Until I realized that it was my conditioning and the belief systems and what I was feeding my mind that's started projecting this. And so I had to sort of heal that belief, right? And so start questioning that belief. Where's this coming from? And why is this there? Why am I keep attracting? So I would start off with where is this coming from, right? Because there can be so much perceptions that you can choose to have, right?
Mhm.
And so it comes from something, right? And and I can tell you that now that I understand the power of being someone with to learning my nervous system. If I feel anxiety and I'm in an elevator, that person's going to feel the anxiety and they're going to feel it. People are, and so it's the same as like you're someone that walks into a room with a high posture and confidence, and you feel confident in yourself, and you look at the world from a safety lens, right? And it's difficult because a lot of people have been through trauma. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to look
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the world with safety, right? And I'm not saying that this is something that, a lot of people have the luxury of doing it,
Mhm.
but going from someone who has healed my own abandonment issues,
Mhm.
I've learned to look at the external world as a safety set because I've learned to be safe with myself.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you're comfortable around men.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to be comfortable around men because I have had to learn to be comfortable with myself and to heal my own traumas and my own cognitive biases and my own perceptions. And even when someone shares something with me, I have to be very careful to not make that my story too.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
I hear
Mhm.
all the time a lot of women like, you know, oh, it's very difficult to find a man, or all men cheat, or and so that right there is I choose to believe that belief, or I choose to just say, okay, that's an interesting point of looking at it. I wonder why this person is saying this.
Hmm.
What has this person been through that led them to believe that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, no. So, I mean, it's nice to hear because, like, one of the main reasons why I stay home on like a Friday or Saturday night is the fear of men. You understand? Like, that's actually a huge reason why I even stepped out of the dating in the first place. Like, I just feel like a lot of women are just very afraid of men, and it's like, what's the point? Like, you understand? Like, why would I step outside of the house if you're just gonna be afraid of me? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's probably a little bit more that I would probably have to sit down and talk to
Uh-huh.
you about outside of Zoom to understand this perspective from you. Um, because I'm sure that there's more uncover beneath that. But I personally feel like, because I'm someone now who has learned about trauma and people who have experience of
Hmm.
sort of trauma,
Uh-huh.
someone who experiences trauma is going to be in a their nervous system is going to be shaped in survival, and so
Yeah,
they're
exactly. Yeah.
always afraid to be, to want to step out the world, or to want to encounter, or to trust people, and I completely understand them. If someone went through something traumatic as far as being raped, or
Yeah, yeah.
very traumatic like that,
Even a heartbreak.
a heartbreak, then I, or like a trust, like a relational, you cannot compare, like there's relational and then there's trauma, right?
Hmm.
What we know is that people who experience relational trauma, they can learn their nervous system by regulating, right? Like someone who's been cheated on, right, which is a very traumatic
Yeah,
experience,
yeah, yeah.
he can still work with that, versus someone who says, I'm in danger right now and this person's going to kill me or rape me. There's a huge difference here, right?
Mm.
So how is this person going to look at reality versus how this person is going to look at reality, right? It's going to be totally different, right? And so that's why, like, I can only speak from my experience. My
Mm.
experience is, because I've learned and I've healed my own trauma, right? I've now learned the importance of, when I do have people come and they share with me, how to also sympathize and empathize with these people, because it's not easy, right? But we have to also be very careful, right? If we're trying to help others, how can we provide safety and help people if we're not feeling that within ourselves?
Mhm.
you know that's very important. As someone now who's like, well, obviously I coach people, and I'm going to coach people. I'm not going to be able to help someone feel safe. How can I help someone feel safe if I don't feel safe? That person's going to feel me feeling not safe. That
Yeah,
person's going to
yeah,
feel it
yeah.
without me even communicating, right? And so that's why I'm saying, like, it's very important that we do the inner work before we start to help others,
Mm.
because how we show up and how we are next to someone who has been through something traumatic, they're going to feel it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, no, yeah. I mean, trauma is really where everything starts, right? Like if a woman is afraid of men, it was probably because of like maybe she was attacked physically or even emotionally. You know, a lot of women are attacked emotionally. Maybe it's what they saw on the news or what their friends have been through. I understand that there could be like a long list of reasons. But yeah, I mean, I have a lot more questions, but I understand it's 10 p.m. and it's Easter and all that. So I definitely want to have another conversation sometime soon. Yeah, is there anything else you want to say or ask or add before I wrap it up?
No, no, that would be it.